In this video, we'll show you how to create openings in curtain stud walls and also to add doors with lintels on them. Shall we?
Okay, now that we've finished the external walls, let's move on to the internal walls and also add the doors. I'm going to delete this wall because I don't need it anymore. Also, I'm going to adjust this section box so it stops showing the bottom chord of the trusses. I just need to drag the top side slightly above the top of the wall. Yep, I think that's enough. Now I can clearly see the walls once they're modeled, or if you prefer, another option is to deactivate the section box completely and simply hide the roof and framing categories. So if I go to visibility and graphics, you'll notice I can't change anything. That's because this view is currently controlled by a view template. Now, if you modify the actual view template, there's always the risk of forgetting to switch it back afterwards. So unless it's a permanent change you really want in the project, I wouldn't recommend editing the template directly. Instead, I always recommend using this tool called Temporary View Properties. This lets us override visibility and graphics temporarily, and it creates this purple frame around the view to remind us that we're working in temporary mode. Once the purple frame appears, go back into visibility and graphics, and let's turn roofs and framing categories off. Now back in the plan view, oh hang on, actually let me close this family first since we already finished using it. Then I'll go back to the plan view. So from here we can create the walls the same way we did before, but this time using curtain walls. I'll choose the 70 by 35 stud wall. Remember to confirm that you are still modeling in height mode and that the top constraint is going to level 1. If you're using an AutoCAD drawing like this one, sometimes Revit recognizes these lines as walls and lets you snap directly to their center line. So I'll click on this side, then make the second click on the opposite side. And if we jump into the 3D view to confirm, everything looks pretty good so far. Now, to understand how openings work in curtain walls, we first need to understand that every curtain wall is controlled by grids behind the scenes. So instead of selecting the actual member, what we really need to select is the grid that controls it. Selecting grids in a 3D view is actually a bit painful. You usually need to press the Tab key several times until you finally catch the correct grid. You'll know the grid is ready to be selected when you see this light dashed blue line running all the way through the noggins in this case. If I click on it, you can confirm the selection here in the Properties palette. Once the grid is selected, I can add or remove segments that belong to it. For example, if I click this one, the grid stays there, but the member disappears. If you find it difficult to pick the grid, another option is to do a multiple selection and then filter only the curtain wall grids. From there, you can continue adding or removing sections of the wall. However, in plan view, it's much easier. As you can see, if I hover over this mullion, the grid pops up almost instantly without any effort. So let's stay in plan view to create the doors. All right, first I'm going to select this grid and unpin it so I can move it freely. You can use the arrow keys to nudge it close to the final position. Or use the Move tool if you want it perfectly precise. So let's do the same for the second stud and move it to the other side of the door opening. Now if we go back into the 3D view, you can see the opening is already starting to look much better. Then, just like before, I'll select and filter the selection so I can access the grid and remove the middle noggin. Now let's add a timber lintel as well. For that, I'll create a section view right in front of the wall, like this, double click it, and let's zoom closer to the opening. So the timber lintel is going to sit right here at the top of the opening. And because we don't actually have a grid here yet to host members, we first need to create one. To do that, go to the Architecture tab and select Curtain Grid. Up here at the top, we have 3 options to create new grids. If I select all segments and move the cursor close to an existing grid, you can see this dashed line preview showing where the new grid would be created perpendicular to the selected grid. So if I click here, it would create members all the way across the wall. We don't want that. So I'll undo it and instead switch to one segment only. Now you can see it only previews a single segment. You can always adjust the height later, so for now I'll just place one roughly here. And in the same way, let's create another member right here in the middle of the opening. However, heads up here. When you start making these adjustments, for some reason Revit sometimes splits the top plate and makes the studs continuous, which is actually the opposite of the configuration we created earlier. It should behave like the bottom plate down here. But honestly, that's not really a problem. At the end, once all the openings are finished, we can simply select everything together from the section view and make them continuous again using this button. Let's make the lintel continuous as well. Another way to do it is by selecting the vertical stud and using these small control buttons to switch between continuity modes until you get the configuration you want. Now, this next part is not really necessary, but just for fun, we can also place actual doors inside the openings. To do that, go again to Load Autodesk Family and under Curtain Wall Panels, which is the same location where we downloaded the empty curtain panel earlier, now we can download any of these door types. I'll just pick one of them and wait for it to load. But before placing the door, let's remove the bottom plate as well. Keep in mind that curtain wall borders don't have grids, so when dealing with borders, you need to use the normal method instead. So unpin the members and simply delete them using the delete key on your keyboard. All right, finally, to place the door, hover over the bottom of the opening and press the tab key 1 or 2 times until the opening itself gets highlighted. If you click it and the properties palette shows curtain panel empty, then you selected the correct element. So unpin it as well and switch it to the door family we just downloaded from Autodesk. And that's it. Now you have a pretty fancy door installed in the wall. If needed, you can also use the split tool to separate the wall into sections in case you don't actually need a physical door. Just split the wall, adjust both sides, and the wall usually adapts automatically while keeping most of the configuration we already modified. In this case, luckily it didn't mess anything up. Sometimes if you move one grid too close to another, weird things can happen. If that happens, just move the other stud grid slightly further away and everything should work again normally. So that's basically it. Now continue modeling the rest of the walls the same way. And at the end, you should end up with something similar to this.
In the next video, we'll show you how to create a double finishing layer for stud walls. See you there!